Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen. With me today, the man who is thoughts become things, Neo-Positivity. This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. And we're also happy because I don't know about you guys, but Colin was just telling us, Colin's our guest today. Colin was just telling us that they just had their first warm weather of the season. He lives in Nova Scotia or near Nova Scotia. I've just been out in like the most gorgeous spring weather that we've had here in Connecticut in a long time. And of course, Neo's in Southern Florida where it's just always gorgeous. So this is like gorgeous weather day, right? This and it's a Friday. I mean, can you have a better combination than that? I don't know that there is one. So, but there is one other thing that we can add to the mix that I think will actually make it better, tastier, spicier, juicier, because our guest, Colin Kingsmill, first of all, he described himself as a whole human coach, and he's been telling us about how he's been really into this stuff, into this law of attraction stuff for like the last, 15, 20 years or something like that.
Yeah, 15 years easily, yeah.
So, I mean, between you and Neo, who like is thoughts become things, he's like traveling the world practically sharing the idea. And what we talk about, this is going to be a fun hour. This is going to be a really fun hour. So, Colin, thank you for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm doing really good. Like I was just saying, I was out for a walk. I didn't expect it to be summer or spring. So I'm a little hot and I look hot and bothered, but I will cool down or maybe I'll heat up. You never know. As
around here with the energy level, you're probably going to heat up. Let's just, we'll put it out there out front,
Sounds good.
Yeah. So give us the biography. Like, how did you get into all this stuff? How'd you become the whole human coach?
Okay. So that's kind of, I'll break it down into two answers, I guess. I became a whole human coach because as a traditional coach, executive coach, and life coach, you have to adhere to the models of the International Coach Federation, which I think are great, right? They're fantastic. But I think in today's world, right, which has become so complex, and our lives have become so complex, that we needed to have a different approach, a wider angle lens, if you want. So my team at Whole Human Coaching, what we do is we look at you a bit more holistically, right? And if we feel that we need to go off of the International Coach Federation sort of guidelines and the strict models, we'll take you there. So, but we won't break the rules. We're going to tell you, hey, I think we should talk about a little bit of mentorship. We should talk a little bit of advice. Let's talk nutrition. Let's talk addiction. Let's talk, what is really going on with you, right? And because there's three of us that do this, and you have one session with one person, one session with another, one session with me, and then we do a 3-on-1. So it's it's supercharged coaching, right? And we come at you from a different areas or different lines of attack, if you like. So we're all quite different. We all have different specialities and different experiences. So we bring it to the table. We bring our experiences to the table to make a shift in you faster than, let's say, the more sort of traditional coaching where you're not supposed to guide and you're not supposed to tell and you're not supposed to direct and all that stuff. You're sort of locked up, right? Even if you might have some advice that might help people. So whole human coaching for a complex world.
Okay, so how did you get there? That's what I'm curious about.
How did I get there?
Yeah, because you had to go through your journey, right?
Yeah, so I mean, I've been in management consulting for 20 plus years now. The first part of my life was in banking in Switzerland. Forgive me for that. For I have sinned.
I worked in the banking industry when I was very young. It's okay. It's one of those rite of passage,
I woke up on April 6, 2001 and changed my life and got into something much more interesting. And I've been doing that for 20 years. It's been fascinating, mostly in sales, marketing, branding, and communications around destinations, around placemaking, around travel, leisure, and hospitality, but also luxury goods and services, and also a little bit today around music and culture. And I found that I wasn't getting to my clients fast enough. Like I was saying, guys, you can't speak to people this way anymore. The world has changed. People don't want to be marketed to or sold to or talked down to or talked to like idiots, right? Because the messaging that you're going out with has been dreamt up by an intern behind an iMac in some creative agency, it's resonating, right? It just doesn't hit. But I remember working with one client in London, and we were working on their brand philosophy, right? I came up with this idea that you can't have brand guidelines anymore. You've got to have a philosophy and approach. Mm-hmm. It took me 3 months to get out of these guys what they were really doing. Mm-hmm. And I thought, you know what? I think I need to go back to school. Uh-huh. And so I went back to school in London and got my coaching certification. And it's been kind of a sort of I've been less and less sort of more and more interested in coaching and helping people and serving. And my mission now is to help people rediscover their humanity. So, and
Neo asked you before we got started, he asked you where you first got into the law of attraction part. Tell us that part of the story.
So that was about 2006. And a good friend of mine who's not on here, he was going to join us. His name is Dean Ellison. He introduced me to Abraham Hicks, Esther and Jerry Hicks. Mm-hmm. And I loved it. It all seemed super interesting. I had done a lot of exploration in the previous years around spirituality. I had that career change in 2001. So I was really into this stuff. I got Eckhart Tolle's new book, and I was kind of wishing I would run into him in Vancouver with The Power of Now. This is a while ago. So I was into it. I was open, and Dean introduced me to it, and I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. A little bit of Joe Dispenza too. Ooh. When What the Bleep, the movie came out. Yeah. I saw him present after the movie came out. So I found all of that really interesting. But the first time, so I got into it, and then I was thrown. This is kind of the story of my life. I get thrown in the deep end, right? And that's why I wrote Fear Less. I get thrown in the deep end. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what the solution is. But I get given projects that are complex, right? That people haven't maybe solved, or the business hasn't solved before or looked at. So in 2006 or 7, I guess, I got asked to go and do a project for the company that I worked for, which was a real estate project in Bora Bora. And it was super high end, and nobody in the company had played in that space yet, right? So they said, well, and by the way, the developer doesn't want to do any marketing. So it's all going to be relationship. Yeah. So sell these villas at 12 million in Bora Bora with somebody that doesn't want to market them.
Right.
Back in the day, it was still by introduction only and invitation and all that sort of marketing BS. And so there I was, by myself in Los Angeles with a project that had to get done, and there was no rule book, no guidebook, nothing. It's like, how do I do this? And luckily, my mentor, at the time said, look, I'll give you a coach. Okay. But she's a real estate coach. She's a business coach, but she's also got a spiritual side to her. So she really as we started coaching, she introduced me to the law of attraction in a sort of my second foray into it, in a much more sort of disciplined way, because every week we would sit down and have a coaching session, but it would also be an envisioning session and possibilities and what are you feeling and what can you see and what do you really want to achieve. So I started to really go, okay, well, I've got to sell that stuff and there's no marketing. So I did a mind map of the people that I wanted to connect with.
Okay.
That I thought would resonate with this particular project. And I put Oprah on there. I put Elton John. I put like a lot of people that were just like, all right, fuck it. I'm law of attraction. Let's test it.
Yeah.
And it worked. I mean, I had I remember one day when Oprah's office called me.
Wow.
And set up a call, and it was just an informative thing, and I think ultimately she wasn't interested. But in that process, I met Elton John, I met Hillary Clinton. I was just down in Los Angeles going, how does this happen? Right? But it was because I was getting coached, not only on business practices but on the law of attraction, and I was really beginning to design what tomorrow would look like. And I was testing it, and I just kept ticking the boxes, and it was just, a high Al Gore, like it was crazy kind of thing. And that project ended, and I got asked to do another project in Montenegro, and I have no idea even where that was. I thought it was Montevideo, so I was like, "Oh, we're going to go live in the Caribbean. That's kind of cool." And
not quite.
Not quite. It turned out to be like post-communist emerging market that had just been sort of not freed but separated. So it's like, okay, we're going to build a super yacht marina, and we're going to sell those residences in a post-communist emerging market that has no history of tourism, really, no history of that level of product or luxury. And and it's hard to get to, and there's no flights. And so here I was again, kind of confronted with this another challenge, right? And I in the process of learning from Sandra, my coach, she dove into the concept of vision boards. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, why don't I try it? Like it was working in LA, like it was working marvelously. So we did a vision board of what life in Montenegro might look like. And within 6 months, I mean, literally to the view from the house to Old Town Kotor, it all just happened. And it happened without doing anything. This was the thing, right? I spent the first 15 years of my career, working like a dog, trying to accomplish something, trying to get somewhere, trying to have, all the things you do when you get out of university. And with that first vision board, it was like, wow, this really works. So I kept doing that at key intersection moments in my life. So sort of 2015, there was another project. It was based in London.
You're going to have to, Walt always says I'm chomping at the bits. I'm really
Yeah, go ahead. I'll stop anytime.
First of all, I want everybody to, hashtag law of attraction in the comments, because we got a true guru here. But we need to know what exactly you're doing, because that's my whole thing. I like to learn mental exercises, as I like to call them. So with the vision board, you're thinking a specific thing. You're doing it in repetition or certain times of the day. And what were you doing before the vision boards when you were going for Clinton and Oprah and all that other stuff? So what were your techniques that you were using back then versus
the techniques have really evolved. And back then, in the early days of getting coached and kind of getting introduced to these things, my coach would say, it's all about how you feel in your body and kind of the energy you're emitting and your thoughts and things like that. And I guess a little bit of that resonated with me because I got it and things were happening. But I can tell you that I think I was probably only using about 30% of my capacity. And what I've done recently is I've really embodied it. And I can tell you the technique that I use. It's vision boarding is one part, right? The second part is setting goals that are interim steps to getting to that vision board. Because I think a lot of people might make a mistake of putting up a vision board and then just going, hoping and wishing and thinking that you're going to get there. But it's, life is really made up of a series of steps and decisions to get to that point. So I think one of the first things I would say is break it down. All right. Break down the vision board into smaller steps, smaller passages, smaller goal setting. Mel Robbins on her podcast has done an amazing goal setting toolkit, which is really based on new research and science. And it's great. She did it a few weeks ago. I forget which episode it was, but that's a great toolkit for anybody that wants to take a bigger goal and kind of break it down into stuff that's easily digestible. But I can tell you the really the one thing that has supercharged how my manifestation is working in the law of attraction is my energy and my vibration. I call it my radio frequency.
Yeah.
So I've studied meditation for like 20 years, right? I knew, like, you can see the books here and the books there, and there's more over there. I knew the information, but I hadn't really, until now, embodied it. And
let's talk about that embodiment, because I think that really is vitally important, and it's what I'm still learning. I can't say that I honestly have made that happen consistently, and I'd like to know, how do you make it happen consistently?
So it's been it was almost by accident. Okay, I've signed up to all those apps, like Calm and meditation apps and Headspace and Mind Valley, and I've tried them all. But the one that has allowed me to really be mindful and be able to every single day, multiple times a day, adjust my mindset and my energy and the vibration that's going out. So what the messaging that I'm sending out has been Sam Harris's Waking Up app. And I found, and you may find this too, this is 6 months old, Walt. So there's time for you. I had a gift given to me in September that kind of rocked my world, and I did like 4 sessions of therapy and 4 sessions of coaching and just retuned everything. And I started listening to Sam's Waking Up app, and I started with his 10-minute meditation, guided meditation. And for the first time, I'm like, oh, okay, that's what this means. That's what they're talking about. Mm-hmm. And then I extended it to 20 minutes. And now in the mornings, I do between 20 minutes and an hour of meditation. And I think that the key, the thing that really unlocked for me, I guess, was having one person as a guide, having it consistently every day, and having it, it's just so easy to listen to and to do. And it switched in me. I'm 56, and until 6 months ago, meditation was just, couldn't do it. So I would have these little spurts of great energy, so emitting the right energy, being on the right radio frequency, and then I would fall back into my storytelling and the narratives that take you out of that vibrational space that you've got to be in, right?
And let me interrupt for just 1 second before you continue with that. If you were to describe what that vibrational space is like, how do you describe that? How does that feel to you?
It feels like freedom, and it feels like levity. So what I do is I combine the meditation, the guided meditation, with a lot of sound baths. And I'll take a healing frequency, just on Spotify, or a pineal gland frequency, or anything, kind of uplifting. And I'll walk into the forest and I'll just feel it. So it's freedom up here, and then expression in the body.
Okay.
So it's kind of that 2-step process, and I think the lesson, and maybe your listeners might be, interested in this, or I think the lesson that's important is, often we will know what to do, right? We'll know that thoughts become reality, right? Or thoughts become things, right? And we might have a very superficial level of positivity of, oh, everything's okay and this is right and I'm doing this and I'm blah blah blah. But under it, we tell ourselves a different story.
Mm. Oh
right?
yeah, that's the problem. That's the challenge right there.
Right.
So it's like this always narrative that's just always going on, and we step out of it to be Superman for a second, but as soon as we're no longer proactively thinking, we jump right back on the story train.
That's it. That's it.
Good phrase, story train.
That's why I say like changing that narrative is way more. That's the most important thing you could do, because that's most of your thoughts are on autopilot.
Exactly.
And so if you can affect them every time you fall back onto the story train, if it's putting you in those great places with the great finances and the great relationships. So that's why my whole thing is focus on that. Get that and you're good.
I couldn't agree more, and in fact, I don't know if you saw on my website, but my practice, I mean, the essence of my practice is rediscovering your humanity. That's one thing. But the way I do it is I call it deconstruct to reconstruct. That's my thing. It's like, let's break down all those stories you've got going on in your head, because that's all they are. Mm-hmm. They're stories. They're based on conditioning, and we can go to the root cause of that trauma if you want, and dig that up and work on it and deconstruct that. But once people realize where the trauma has come from, and the incident that it may have occurred, it may have been a divorce at 10 years old, something like that. I'm not saying major trauma, that's enough. But if you recognize where that came from, and you recognize the conditioning and the storytelling you've been giving yourself, you can break that down, and you can write a new story to listen to every day up here. But you're right, Neo. It's the most important thing, the stories we tell in our heads. And that's why I think it's so important to have some kind of practice. And it doesn't matter what it is. Like I wear something, just to kind of go, okay, go back, remember. Like if I yeah, exactly. Right. like just even, it could be a Post-it, right? But have something to remind you all day long to stay in that center space of not worrying about the future, not worrying about the past, not getting into your head, not trying to control something, not getting into your stomach. If you're in that centered space, thanks to, let's say, a practice or meditation or reading or deconstructing the stories, reminding yourself, then you can be on the right radio frequency. And it's really interesting. I tested it the other day. I was in a bit of a crabby mood at somebody, and so I remember, like, I got out of my car and I slammed the door and I sat on the bench, and I'm like, I was like all frustrated. Then I walked across the street, and I wasn't on the sidewalk, and some guy starts yelling at me, and I'm like, oh, there we go. Like I never get you. This is Nova Scotia, right? It's like the friendliest province in Canada. I never get yelled at, but I noticed I dipped out of my zone, and immediately there was negativity right there.
There it is.
And I guess the last sort of piece of the puzzle, guys, of starting in 2006 and then having the coach and testing these vision boards. And we did the same thing when we moved back to Canada a year ago. Did another vision board, and it's all happened. But the other thing is is really the science. 15 or 20 years ago, when Joe Dispenza was talking, or Candace Pert, molecules of emotion, or any of that stuff, it was kind of woo-woo back then, right?
Oh yeah. Well, for many people, it's woo-woo now. Not as many, but still is.
Say that.
but now the science of what's happening in here is coming out.
It's starting to back it up. That's why people are coming around.
Yeah. So when you say thoughts become things, it's like, oh well, now they can measure it. Mm. Now they can measure your energy waves. Now it's
I want
exciting stuff.
to tell a quick story.
Yeah, please do.
It's about karaoke. Right? I've signed up for karaoke at least a dozen times in my life. When they call my name, I'm in the bathroom. I've never done it. I'm a great shower singer, and I kill it when I'm walking around the house. So I never went up on stage. And Walt knows I'm a stage guy.
Absolutely,
I
yeah.
stage. That's where I'm most comfortable, but not with that part of me, I guess. And so I signed up for it last year, and they made sure I didn't disappear. So I had to go on stage. I sung, and I evidently did great because they wanted me to do an encore. And then this girl asked me to do a duet with her, but she was singing the song by Lady Gaga that I've never heard before.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm just up there like I'm falling apart. So anyway, the time is coming up for the next, because it's at the Dental Festival, which is coming up in August. And last night I thought about it. I said, you know what? There was one girl there that killed it. She was amazing. And I want to do like this one song that's a duet. You need a female to do it. It's Luther Vandross and Mariah Carey. And Endless Love. So I said, you know what? I'm gonna get her to do this song with me. I've never talked to this girl on the phone before in my life. She's cool. We hung out at the Dental Festival, after karaoke and everything like that, like the whole group. But I never called her outside of that. I haven't talked to her since. That was in July. So no lie, this morning I'm doing my ritual, my affirmations while doing my stretching and stuff like that. She FaceTimes me. Have not spoken a word to this female in almost a year, 9 months. And she FaceTimed me. I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So because I didn't just think about it last night. I went through the song. I want to make sure I could hit those notes. So
I love it.
I was leaving her part to her, and I was doing my part, and I even probably went through the song 2 or 3 times to make sure that I could hit all the notes. And that was just amazing how that happened. I just wanted to share that with you guys. It was it's unbelievable.
I mean, it's just there's I don't know. It's not even up for debate anymore, is it? If you're sending out the right energy, or you're thinking about, it comes back. I mean, I really dove into kind of vibrational.
It may not be
energy.
up for debate anymore, but we still debate it. It's not like there's any lack of doubt. Doubt is plentiful.
What's the craziest part? When she called me this morning, that's the first thing I thought. Damn, this stuff really works. But I know it works. I've been using it for years. I'm the thoughts become things king. But sometimes it's so shocking that it's just like, wow, this shit is crazy. But what I really wanted to get at with that was I wanted to get your opinion behind what exactly goes into that manifesting, because I didn't see her calling me. I didn't feel her calling me. I didn't think I was going to see her until August. And that's when I was going to, hey, let's do this at the karaoke thing tonight. So there was no forward push on my behalf in my mind versus like when I wanted my golf cart. I cleared a space out in my garage. I even put things in the middle to take up the space of the golf cart. I visualized myself driving it, how happy it would be. Same thing I do with my airplanes and all this other stuff that I be doing. Like there's specific sets and guidelines of things that I do to manifest things. And I didn't do any of that last night.
But we know that you did do it because you vibrated to it. I mean, that's what happened. We know how the theory works. So evidently you did vibrate to it, and she responded on that vibrational wave. I mean, that's what happened. The part that we have trouble is wow, it worked again.
It's crazy. But you know what? You make a good point, because while I was practicing my vocals, I was on stage in the moment, there in the present moment. I was there. And that is a huge part of all of my mental exercises.
Right.
Clearly you guys know this as well as anybody. You got to see it as though it's happening now. Mark 11:24, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you already have it, and it will be yours. For all you religious buffs out there. It's in there. It's in the Bible a bunch of times. You just got to look a little deep.
But that's why it's so important, I think it's so important to make sure that the desired thinking, which is up here, doesn't have a vat of negativity below it in your subconscious, right? Oof. That's what
But that's where we all trip up. That's the common experience.
Yes.
And that's what I call baggage. When people say baggage, they might be talking about a female that has 5 kids or whatever to say. When I say baggage, I'm talking about basically everything negative you've been through or heard or notion that you've had that was negative that can cling on to any dream, goal, or positive thought that you have and try to drag it down metaphorically. So that's why the baggage we have to kind of scrape to the side and find a way to get through or get over.
I couldn't agree more, and that's why I think it's so important to address it, right? To make sure, whether it's sports or therapy or coaching or whatever is your tool, to understand where those stories and narratives came from and to eliminate them, deconstruct them, set up a new belief system. And I mean, I've lived it on my own skin, right? Knowing or discovering a sort of a childhood trauma only recently, last year, thanks to a great gift that was given to me of letters that I hadn't seen.
Wow.
I was able to realize that I'd been functioning in a certain way for 30 years, right? So now I'm like, oh, wow, now that I've cleaned that up, who knows what sort of possibilities there are. Sure. But it's really important to not just, buy the magazine, tear the things, maybe wish it's like wishing and hoping.
Yeah.
It ain't going to get you there. It's a practice. It's like you say, it's getting rid of that baggage.
It's got to be a way of life.
Yes.
I always compare it to jogging. If you stop jogging for a month, you're not going to be great at it anymore. This is a life practice. Every day you got to do this. But I want to ask you this, and Walt, I would like your answer for this too, because I don't think I've ever asked you this. For someone who doesn't have I'm from the hood, so I always try to look out for people from the hood because they don't have the resources that most of us are blessed to have, and the money. And even if they do have YouTube, which is free, and access to the videos, which is free, they might not know about them, or they might think it's wishy-washy hippie stuff. So to someone that is in that situation, they don't have the finances or whatever, and they just want to unpack some baggage. I know that just reliving the traumatic incident isn't it. You can't just relive it. So what would you suggest somebody do at home on their own if they know the traumatic incident, they just don't know how to unpack it? What would you suggest they do to unpack it and then rewrap it?
Yeah. What I do is what I tell people or work with people on is going back to that point in time that they recognize where the trauma came from. Okay. And often it's a child dealing with, perhaps with parents that are fighting, dealing with parents where the child feels that they need to solve everything and fix everything, or they need to be there. That way they won't fight. There's a thousand traumas that can happen to children in their development or adults. For me, it's go back and find that child, embrace them, or find that adult or that person or that moment in time, go back and embrace them and forgive them and give them love and tell them that they were only coping after that, right? So whatever they did was a coping mechanism, right? So whether it's turning into a radical people pleaser, turning into somebody that's a control freak, turning into, an addict, whatever mechanism you choose at that point in your development, right, to carry on with. Unfortunately, we forget that it was a coping mechanism for a point in time during a trauma, but it doesn't have to be. So I teach people or instruct people or walk people through, and it can be really quick to recognize it, to forgive, to love that little 9-year-old girl or boy, right?
Hold on real quick. When you're referring to this person, that's that version of them or the person who did whatever they did to them?
The version of them.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's say parents are fighting all of the time. Okay. And me as a child, I decide that as an 8-year-old or a 6-year-old, that if I'm present and I'm always there and I'm always trying to fix something, then it's going to be okay. But unfortunately, kids don't know how to operate in situations like that, whether it's, abuse or family fighting or divorces or other abuses, an accident, whatever. You don't know when you're 9 or 10 or 12 or 14 how to deal with these things. So it's going back and recognizing that you're okay. You were okay. You did the very best you could. You were coping the only way you knew how. And it's interesting. A lot of people that I've worked with, they have this aha moment of, I was just coping, but I don't need to anymore. I don't need to be the protector, the controller, the yes person, the person without boundaries, whatever programming and conditioning I've brought forward to today doesn't have to be my tomorrow. So that's really what I do. And there's a lot of, and again, if people don't have the opportunity to buy the books or whatever, but there's people like Gabor Mate. He has a book out now called The Myth of Normal. And he's all over YouTube on precisely these issues of, we are in a toxic society, and we have traumas, and we don't recognize them, and we carry them through life, and they condition us, but they don't have to anymore. So he's there's lots and lots of videos out there right now on this kind of subject. I don't know if I answered your question.
Oh, you did. I want to get Walt's take on it, because something Colin said before, while he was just talking right now, was that at that age we don't know how to cope with it. And Walt has recently been through some traumatic stuff after doing this show 5 days a week for 10 years. Yeah. So I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say, Walt.
All right. I'm going to draw heavily on the Taya practices. This is from Colin. You probably don't know, but this is from David Strickle, who channels the Stream of David. So the Stream of David is to David Strickle as Abraham is to Esther Hicks. It's that kind of thing. Yeah. And they have a program called Taya. TYA stands for Trust Your Abundance, and a lot of it has to do with the kind of thing that Neil's asking about here. How do you unpack that history? My answer, it's going to partly include Taya, but it's also going to include a kind of a logic thing here. So the logic thing is, how old are you? If you are, say, a kid or in your teens, my answer is going to be different from if you're in your 20s or if you're in your 30s, 40s, or 50s.
It makes sense.
The reason is what you were talking about earlier, Neo, the baggage, as you called it. I love that word, baggage. The older you are, the more baggage you're carrying. The younger you are, the less baggage you are carrying. And depending on how little baggage you are carrying, you may not need to do the unpacking. You may be able to just blow right through it just by learning to apply the concepts that, Neil, you talk about all the time. Mm-hmm. It's just a question of how much baggage you built up. And I can't give you like a rule of thumb that says, well, it's this much baggage. You're going to kind of have to evaluate that for yourself. I think most people have a pretty good idea. If they're trying to unpack something, they have some sense about how much baggage there is there. So if you feel like it's a ton of baggage, then instead of just going at it and understanding how to apply the law of attraction, I would apply the Taya practice. And the Taya practice works very much like this. It's one of the few times that you do something I really hate doing, and that's journaling. I have always hated journaling.
Me too.
Can't stand it. But I got to tell you, for this one thing, this is the one time I do journaling, and it works beautifully. And it works like this. First of all, if you need to be unpacking stuff, you recognize you're not going to unpack it all today. Today, you're going to try to unpack some of it. It doesn't matter how much you succeed in unpacking. As long as you unpack some of it, it's a victorious day. So that's what you're trying to do. You're just trying to unpack some bit of it. And the
you've already stumped me, because I can't. That racks my brain just hearing that. But go ahead. I want to do it all now. Like when I come home from vacation, everything gets put away.
It's along the line of what Colin was talking about earlier. instead of trying to vision board all the way out, you vision board it in stages.
Yeah.
It's the same thing here. Instead of unpacking everything all at once, you unpack it in stages, because it's always easier to do incremental than it is to do one giant leap.
Yeah.
Now, if you can pull off one giant leap, go for it. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. I'm just saying be prepared for the fact that you may not get the whole thing done all in one day, but you can certainly get part of it done. So set your mind on, I'm going to get at least part of it unpacked. Maybe I can do all of it, but I'm going to do at least some of it. That much is going to get done today for sure. And the way you do it is you sit down and you get out a piece of paper and a pen, and you do it by hand. You write this stuff out. You start by writing, okay, what can I remember about when this stuff happened? What can I remember about what the details are? You get as many of that stuff out on paper as you can. You don't worry about how good the English is. You don't worry about anybody else reading it, because nobody else is ever going to read it. You don't worry about editing it. You don't worry about how well the story, you don't worry about any of that. You're just, for yourself, you're trying to write out what happened as well as you can remember it. After you've written it out, then you go back and you remember the other players, and you try to do this. You try to put yourself into their places, into their minds, and say, what were they thinking at that time, as well as I can understand that.
Yes.
You don't have to approve of it. You don't have to like it. You can actually think it's shitty what they did, but you try to lay out what it is that you think that they were thinking. And as you go through that part of that process where you first lay out what happened and what they were thinking, it becomes easier just by writing it out to then take the next step and say, to what extent can I appreciate that they were doing the best that they knew how to do at that time? Because that process, if you repeat that over and over again, it's that same 3 steps. You write the thing, you write what the other people were thinking, and then you write, to what degree can I appreciate that they were doing the best that they knew how to do. If you repeat that over and over again, as you're unpacking all this stuff, as you're remembering stuff, it's coming back to you. I remember that this happened. I remember that I got attacked for that, and I got beaten up for that, and this terrible thing happened, and somebody got shot. If you can work through all those with that 3-step process every single time, you will unpack all of it, and you'll turn it into what we call vibrational dust, where it's still there, but it doesn't haunt you anymore.
No.
Well, you're not carrying the baggage around it. You've
That's
deposited it. You said that I'm going to leave that there, and I think that's perfect. The only thing I would add is and you forgive those people as well. Right?
Well, yes. Like, that's actually a more advanced step, but you're right. That's ultimately where you're trying to get to.
Well, and because you think about it, right? I think, I was 6 years old. Well, my mom was 25 at that time, right? Like, she was a child. So
I'll tell you honestly, the reason I left that part out, if you're going through, especially if it's people from the hood, they've been through some really horrible traumas. It may be too far at this point to be able to forgive that.
Yeah.
So you don't worry about the forgiving just yet. It's more important just to get it out.
Yeah.
That's when you adapt that rent free, where it's like, no one's going to live in my mind rent free. No traumatic incident's going to live in my mind rent free.
Yeah.
If you can combine that with the oneness, the whole, we are all one. We're all one vibrating energy wave. You're just vibrating at a different number than I am, and a different space on this energy wave than I am. That whole oneness makes you can't hate your neighbor, because to hate your neighbor is to hate yourself. So you kind of mix those two together and try to come up with a lovely potion that lets you have someone sit in your headspace without any type of animosity or blood pressure rising when you just think about them. But
and by the way, this process is going to bring up a lot of blood pressure. It's going to bring up a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, a lot of bitterness, and that's okay.
As long as you don't let it sit for the next 2 days.
Yeah. I think our society is really hard, So often with people, I say, and in this process, be gentle with yourself.
Yeah.
Don't beat yourself up too, like it's hard enough outside.
When we go through this, it is actually one of the most emotionally distressing practices to go through, this journaling thing that I was describing. It's very distressing. The one thing that I found helped me the most in getting through it was if I allowed myself to complete the process and not stop in the middle of it, if I allowed myself, even though it was hurting and I was pissed and I was angry and I was frustrated, if I allowed myself to just keep going with the process until the feeling just dissipates, not because I stopped, but because I've been working through it enough that it starts to dissipate. If I can get to the point where I can feel it's dissipating and then go a little bit further, it's amazing how fast the feeling stops entirely. That's where you've reached that vibrational dust stage. You actually have to get through to that point where that vibrational feeling, that intense anger and so forth, it dissipates and dissipates until, oh, I don't feel it anymore. I mean, I remember a moment ago I was really angry, and my body still feels that anger, but I'm not actually feeling angry anymore. I'm feeling something else right now. It doesn't matter what it is. I'm just feeling something else right now. And you realize, oh, I really can let go of this stuff. It actually does go away. And it goes away fairly quickly, but only, this is what they call working it through, only if I work it all the way through.
I do this thing with people. I ask them to think about a Flintstone. You know, like a Flintstone to light, not the Flintstones, but like a Flintstone to light a fire. You know, we at every moment, every nanosecond, every millisecond in time, at any given Flintstone moment, you can decide to go up or to swirl down. So I always ask people to stop in their tracks and, you know, ask them, what was that decision that you just made, you know, to start ruminating over that topic again, right? And just reminding people that they have a choice, potentially, if the stories aren't too swirling.
Yeah, that's all about being aware, because if you're not a conscious person, if you're not used to waking up, that can seem impossible, but that's the whole practice.
And terrifying.
You have to practice waking up.
Terrifying, depressing, anxiety. Yeah. No, otherwise, I mean, that's why a practice like meditation is just, or prayer, or whatever practice you want to use.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's actually something I left out, and I shouldn't have left it out. Part of that entire practice is before you do the journaling, you do the meditating. In other words, you meditate as well as you can. You don't even have to be good at it, but you take 5 or 10 minutes to do the best you can to calm your mind so that the journaling will have the maximum benefit for you.
Right. Yeah, that's
meditation is key. That was like when I first learned about the law of attraction. I said, the first thing I'm gonna have to do is get this under wraps, because if thoughts become things and this is running rampant all day, that's not good. That means I'm manifesting all kind of stuff. Because you gotta remember, I was a cop in the most dangerous city at that time. So my scenarios were going everywhere. I had dreams and aspirations versus what I was seeing. Homicide, SWAT team, undercover, family.
Right.
It was just, you know, so that was my first thing. Gotta meditate. Gotta learn how to meditate. Get this under wraps. And then everything else will fall into place. And it did. So that totally makes sense, Walt. 100%.
And by the way, you don't even have to meditate perfectly. I mean, I'm sure the first few times you meditated, it didn't even hardly work. Like, well, I'm just sitting here. My thoughts are going nuts. You know, it's a waste of time. You know, it doesn't matter. Just the fact that you sat down and tried for 5 to 10 minutes and failed utterly still slowed you down enough to get more benefit out of doing the journaling. The whole point is to slow it down as much as you can right there so you can get the benefit out of the journaling. That's why you're doing the meditating.
16 days.
This much, then you got that much improvement.
I want to give everybody my cheat code. I meditated my butt off for 16 days, or at least I tried, and it was torture. My thoughts were coming a mile a minute, and I just kept thinking, why won't I stop? Why won't these thoughts just stop? I just kept thinking that. And on the 16th day, I remembered something from the movie The Secret. The guy said, I'm so happy and thankful that I get nothing but checks in the mail. And I said, you know what? I'm so happy and thankful that I enjoy meditating. I'm so happy and thankful that I'm good at meditating. I'm so happy and thankful that I love meditating. I started saying that. From that day on, meditation has been one of my favorite parts of every single day is meditating. Nice. And so, use that cheat code. Put it before anything. You could put that I'm so happy and thankful for before anything. Use it. It's an amazing one.
Yeah, one other thing that I would really emphasize here too is all of these practices are what's required. But I would add a kind of a preface to that and say, you have got to stop absorbing negativity. And by that, I mean the news channels, 24-hour news, headline news, evening news, listening
Any
to the news
news.
before you go. Often social media, they're all designed to get you off track. So if you want to create a practice of the law of attraction, you can't have that going on too. Like, you can't be scrolling Twitter all day and then getting on Instagram and then Facebook and then watch the evening news, because it just tuning
fork.
It just ruins.
You are a tuning fork.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
You can spend all day feeling good, vibrating at that good energy, and then watch Fox News for 10 minutes. Yeah. And their vibration is now your vibration.
10 minutes, about 10 seconds.
And look, 10 seconds to get in, a lot longer to get out. Yeah. If you're not good at meditating, if you're not a guru at shaking stuff off, you could still be festering for a while. And to that note, the whipping post, you guys know the whipping post? Ancient Spartans, they used to whip them once a week just to keep them in that mind frame. I'm back into taking cold showers now because I live such a luxurious, cushy life. I had a tiny dispute with a cousin over something stupid, over crypto. And it was resolved before the phone call was over. But all that day and the next day, I was feeling anxiety about this stupid conversation because I wasn't used to being uncomfortable. So what you do is, at the end of your shower, just turn the water to cold, and I just sit there for 30 seconds. Like, as much as I want to scream, I just eat it for 30 seconds. And then I turn the water off, and that's when I scream. I'm like, yeah. You feel like you're on top of the world. But that's kind of the thing. So I love the whole whipping post thing, with that minus the whipping post, but you gotta stay. You can't be too comfortable. But I do avoid the news like the plague.
No news really is good news.
And also toxic relationships. I mean, one of the things that I'm writing about is kind of all of these steps that you need to kind of take to create the create the stage for the law of attraction to happen. Because if you don't stop absorbing that negativity, if you don't listen to your body and yourself, and if you continue to sort of not set boundaries, for example, and saying yes when you don't want to say yes, all of those little things will have an impact on your radio frequency.
And tying back to what you said earlier too, you mentioned how important it is to be kind to yourself, to not beat yourself up, is the way I would put it. And part of the not beating yourself up part is you're committing to do your best to take the news out, to take the social media out. If you slip, you don't beat yourself up about that either. Guess what? We all slip. That's just part of being a human being. The idea is to make it my plan. I'm just going to do everything I can to get the stuff out of my life. And if I slip sometimes, I slip sometimes. So what? I'll take, then the next day I'm going to do some more to take it out of my life.
That's what's meant to happen. That's how I look at stuff like that. It's meant to happen that way. Can't build a time machine.
Yeah.
Forward.
Well, in theory, you can't. Yeah, perhaps you could. Anyway, I don't. Who knows these days? Right. Who knows? But sometimes if I do want to, dive into YouTube for a minute and watch this stuff, I'm conscious that I'm eating a candy. It's like I'm conscious that I want a bit of that junk food.
Yeah.
Right. So I know that I'm not going in there unconsciously and letting that stuff get me. I'm just, I'm going in for a treat because I want to see, I don't know, for some reason I want a piece of chocolate, it's like an indulgence, but then but you got to know you're doing it. That's the message.
I love that analogy. That's how I handle TV shows. Cause I stopped watching a lot of TV shows because I would find myself running those scenarios later on at night. What would I do to get out of that situation? And I said, whoa, I don't want to water that seed. And so I stopped watching certain TV shows, but the ones that I do still watch, I go into it with that mentality.
Yeah.
A lot of times I'll see the actors as actors as opposed to the scenario that's happening. And that's how I kind of pull myself out. Like, this isn't
Don't totally suspend the disbelief, right?
Yeah, totally get rid of it.
That's
especially a lot of shows that I watch. I've met a lot of the actors, and so I'm like, he almost slipped.
yeah, it's
Gotta pull yourself out.
absolutely.
Colin, this has been, as usual. I mean, we only have a few minutes left, and we've flown through the show. That's the way it usually happens around here. It's crazy how fast. I swear, I think this show is probably best proof that exists that time doesn't exist, because there's no other way for me to explain how it flies so fast.
Yeah, it's crazy. A few minutes before the show, I felt like time almost had stood still. I was like, oh, wow, it's only, it's, I'm catching myself a lot these days in that sort of time warp.
Right? Yeah.
Time.
Well, there are a couple things, though, that we got to iron out before we lose you, because this is important stuff. First of all, we didn't really talk about this, but you're a whole human coach. We mentioned at the beginning that we kind of left that part behind. But this is like important stuff. So I think people who have listened to you have a pretty good idea of where you're at, where you're coming from. If there's somebody who's tuned in who's saying, that's the guy I need to work with, he needs to know how to find you. So how does he find you?
It's super easy. It's just colinkingsmill.com. On my website, you can book a discovery call. That's it. I mean, or I'm on Instagram, Colin Kingsmill. That's it. My website. I'm there. You'll find me.
And very briefly, I got to ask you one other thing too. How do you recommend that someone pick a life coach?
Pick me. No, it's okay. Say it.
Like, how do I recommend who they pick?
Yeah, because I've been in that place. I know what that's like. And I know what my answer turned out to be, but I'm always curious to know what somebody else's answer is. When you're trying to decide who I think everybody has this feeling when they think about getting a life coach. Yeah, but who can I trust? Mm-hmm. Who can I trust to really have my interests at heart? Yeah, I know these people all say they do, but who do I really, really trust? How do I know that person's actually going to be the right one, who's going to be able to hold me accountable the way I need to be held accountable, and who's going to help guide me in the way I need to be guided? How do I find that person? How do I figure out who that person is?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, I think the first thing is you want to define what you actually want to get out of it, right? Why are you choosing to do this, right? So I think if you look at that why, you may be able to skim some of the surface off. But I mean, the second thing is you test them, right? And it has got to feel right, but doesn't necessarily have to feel good. Does that make sense? They've got to have the right energy to jive with you, but they've also got to hold you accountable and kick your ass when you need to. Otherwise, you're just wasting your money with somebody who's just going to, babble along with you. And look at their experience, right? Look at what they bring to the table. I think it's a profession that's not totally regulated. So there's a lot of people that are in it that may not have the toolkit for you. So make sure that person has the toolkit based on the destination that you want to get to. So, you may intuitively feel like you need a life coach, but don't go into it like you're going to a smorgasbord. If you feel like you need one, define why you feel it, find out the toolkit that they've got to see if it matches the destination that you want to get to with that particular life coach. And it may be that you need different life coaches at different stages for the objective that you want to achieve.
I want to piggyback on that and just say, if you get a chance, watch them speak for like at least a half an hour. Because certain people like Colin, listening to him speak today, I'd be like, all right, yeah, he knows what he's talking about. That'll get you. If they're constantly blowing you away with what they're saying, then you're like, all right, yeah, I need him. So try to find him. Everybody has stuff, places, YouTube and stuff like that. Find it.
That's where the resonance really comes in. Absolutely. I like that. Colin, one more thing I need to do before we part company for the day. And this is a regular practice I make around here because I think it's something that we don't do enough of. and this is true for you as it is for anyone else who comes onto the show. You're a giver. You're giving your time. You give your energy. You give your writing. You're giving constantly with a whole bunch of different ways.
Yeah.
And there are people who are absorbing that. People you'll never meet, you'll never see, and many of them are taking it. They're turning it into good stuff, and which is great. But you aren't getting the recognition for it. I like to give recognition for that. So on behalf of all those people you've never met and you've never seen, thank you for what you've been giving and what you're continuing to give, because it's really, really important. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I can feel that in my whole body. So your words have been very effective. I got it. Thank you. Very much appreciated.
I love that. That's great.
It's a great. I can feel my whole body tingling, and it's that state. It's a perfect state to kind of end the day and end the week and end the conversation. I really appreciate it.
Nice.
And Neil, I got to come to you actually for the final part of the conversation. Give us the summary and give us that sign off you always give us, because it's an important sign off.
I don't know about a summary. Everybody did a great job this week. No matter what happened, you did a great job because you made it through. And I know a couple people who didn't. So on that note, shout out to all the military and first responders. And thank you, Walt, for all that you do, brother.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you guys so much. And thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Much appreciated.